I was so excited to record this episode today. I had to race out here with wet hair. So if you're watching this on YouTube, you can see my wet hair as I had to come record this message for you because I have so much to say. And this is a topic I'm so passionate about and something that has been such a through line for me in my business for so long. I'm like, I can barely contain it. And I hope I can get all my ideas out and do it in a way that's fast and succinct. So we're not here all day, but let's get started. What would be easy? This is a question I've asked my clients for 10 years. It is how I stopped glorifying discipline and things being unnecessarily hard. And today I want to tell you why and what I use in its place. Okay, so for over a decade, and those of you guys who've been here for a while, you know this is true. One of the first questions I would ask my clients when we were in any coaching or consulting capacity and they were struggling, is what would be easy? Just close your eyes and just think about what would be easy. And its sister question is, what would be fun? And I know this sounds a little outrageous, but that's the point, right? Because after a lifetime of things needing to be hard to count, this is such an important shift to make if you are actually wanting to enjoy your work and life. The other piece of this is it's not just about moving in the direction of least resistance, which we will talk about. It is about the energy that you're bringing to the work. So it's about how you're showing up and what people are actually getting from you on an energetic level, which when you come to the work with ease and with fun is so much better, so much more magnetic, and so much more effective, especially when we're talking about marketing, than the slog, the should, the doing it the way you're supposed to, or doing it the hard way because that's the way that you feel like you have to do it in order for it to be correct or to count. Today, I want to dive in a little bit to why ease is not about laziness and how it's basically a better engine than something like discipline in order to get the outcomes that you want, believe it or not. And that for it to work, it's not structureless. It's not just taking naps and eating crisps on the couch and watching reality TV. It's not what we're talking about here. And I know when I speak about ease, when I speak about joy, we immediately have resistance that comes up because we're like, oh my gosh, ease, joy, these are not things I will be rewarded for. These are not things my parents told me to be, right? These are not things that get glorified by society. So don't worry, we're going to dig into that too. Hello. This is the Joy First podcast, and I am your host, Jay Nicole Smith. You can call me Nick. And today we are talking about one of our first joy experiments, the things that I am doing in my life and business to live and work in more joy first ways. And the very first one I wanted to share with you is this question, what would be easy? Breaking it down to see why does it work and how do we do it in a way that increases productivity and output and doesn't increase our likelihood to be on the couch at noon, which is also okay sometimes, right? We do need rest. It's an important part of high performance, but I think we immediately default in this conversation to some fear around if I let myself relax, if I let myself choose ease, if I try and work or live in a joy first way, I won't get as much done. I won't be as valuable. I won't get the results that I want. And today I want to spend a little bit of time hopefully proving to you why that just simply isn't true. I think this question, and having asked it for so long with so many people, is actually one of the foundational pillars of the Joy First work for me. I think that was one of the first ways I embodied and vocalized this idea around what if we choose the easier way on purpose. And that was connected to my work with entrepreneurs around freedom and fulfillment. What if we got to do this in a way that didn't have to be miserable? What if misery is not the key to our success? And what I found, especially because I'm someone who's taught marketing and done marketing and branding and design for people for so long, which are things that business owners tend to be quite resistant to, stepping through that resistance, stepping through those obstacles and growth challenges is not easy. It takes time, it takes strategies, and sometimes we have to have hacks. Sometimes we need a mentor or a mirror, someone who can look at you and say, what would be easy, as like a permission slip to actually choose that as a strategy. And the reason I did that is because it works. And like I said earlier, the energy you bring is so connected to how you enter the task, how you choose to approach the project or the job or the thing that you're trying to achieve. If you can shift yourself into an energy of ease, of joy, of fun, everything works better. And this is foundational to the joy first body of work. What if joy isn't the thing that we should avoid in order to get what we want because we have to work so hard to get what we want? What if joy is the path to make what we want show up faster, easier? What if the journey is the thing? What if it's not all about this destination that we've been trained to pursue? So one of the things I've noticed, and this is very similar to the question, what would be easy, and our initial resistance to that, is that when I talk about joy, when I talk about especially the words joy first, I think can be really challenging for people sometimes. Some people don't really associate with joy. They feel like it's that bright orange jump up and down thing that they don't really gravitate towards. Or sometimes what we immediately feel when we hear joy first is resistance of, I couldn't possibly put joy first, because if I put joy first, how am I going to get anything done? We have this immediate, especially those of us who are brought up in this, I need to be a productive member of society, I need to be responsible and make money, capitalist, individualistic, Western paradigm, right? We weren't brought up to prioritize community, especially us white people or people who were not in religious groups or didn't have some tribe that they were a part of where community was just inherent, right? We're a multi-generational family, like so many of us, and I know a lot of my peers, a lot of white women in particular, who grew up isolated or they were latchkey kids in all white bubbles and didn't necessarily have or understand what community meant. They didn't have that. And so it just continued to reinforce this belief that we are on our own. We got to make it on our own, right? We can't be a starving artist, and we have to work hard and hustle, and we have to be really serious and responsible. And these are the keys to our success. This is what is going to unlock this freedom that we want, right? Financial freedom, safety and security for our families, our ability to have choice, right? We never want to have to rely on a man for our financial well-being. And I think that has led to a lot of this fierce independence, and this fierce independence has led to a lot of energy around it having to be hard to matter, and that hard is a good signifier that you're doing the right thing. And it's not. There's no medal for doing it the hard way. No one's going to reward you for, ooh, was that really extra painful and took extra long? Great. Here's your gold medal. Here's your gold star for it being extra painful. No. So where does that leave us? I think in the conversation around joy, the question I'm asking is, what if we made more of our decisions in the pursuit of joy instead of moving away from discomfort or moving away from fear? What if we actually allowed the pursuit of ease and joy to be the thing? What could that unlock? And the research says, certainly my experience says as well, that when we prioritize joy, when we can prioritize ease, it turns out it works better. And what we can unlock is not only enjoying the journey becomes the destination, but also it unlocks ease in how well and quickly things work in our favor. We become a bit more magnetic. People are drawn to us. If you've been on the internet in the last 2 weeks, then you've probably seen Jessie Jean Home, an Instagram influencer who has gone totally viral for over $1 million launch of a Let's Yap challenge. Yapping is basically just face to camera videos, sort of like this, unscripted. And she's absolutely blowing up the internet with this challenge that she sold for $297. And she's had like over 4,000 people buy it because she's gone viral. That did not work because it was hard. Now, I'm not saying this wasn't strategic and she didn't put effort in. Of course she did. But she's not getting that outcome because she hustled harder or made it harder or it took longer. If you look back at her Instagram, this seems like a recent pivot. So this is her responding quickly to something that people clearly wanted and needed and just getting it out the door and letting it be easy and building in public. And I think it's such a good current example of What would be easy? If I wanted to launch a yapping challenge in the next 2 weeks and invite people in, what could that look like? That was easy, right? That wasn't hard. She mentioned something about having like Claude build the website, and like step after step after step. I think she used strategy, of course, but she didn't get in her own way about it having to be hard to be worthy. One of the words that's come up in the book, the Joy First book that I'm writing, is this word responsible, and all the judgment we have for ourselves around being irresponsible. And that is something I've deep dived into, because I have made a lot of really irresponsible decisions that have been some of my best life choices. Moving to the UK with 6 weeks notice after knowing the man who is now my husband for 6 months, having only hung out with him 7 times, like seems pretty irresponsible on the tin, right? That doesn't seem like a wise, smart, thought out life choice. And it wasn't. It was quite impulsive, but it was because I knew. And so I talk a little bit in the book about some of these really irresponsible things that I've done, which have been the best possible choices I could have made. And I never would have made them if I was mired in the fear, or letting the fear of what could go wrong lead and drive, instead of the possibility of what could be right, or the pursuit of the potential joy on the other side, and being willing to get it wrong along the way. So I think responsible and irresponsible are really interesting words to look at. One of the biggest words for me that I mentioned already is the word discipline. This is a word I absolutely hate, not just because I don't like discipline, not just because it fits my personality type, but because some of you may know my career started in the pet industry. So I started a graphic design and commercial photography studio way back in 2005, and I focused in the pet industry, meaning I worked mostly with dog and cat and horse brands, mostly dog, for like 15 years. This was my niche. I became very well known in this world, in the US and the UK, worked with lots of huge brands. And with it came an absolute wealth of incredible lessons. But one of the things that happened along the way is I got a dream client back in 2011. I had co-created a lifestyle brand called Dog is Good with a couple of partners. And in 2011, we got Victoria Stilwell as a client, and we did a line of t-shirts for her, which was like dream come true. I love Victoria. I love her ethos. I loved the show It's Me or the Dog. And it was such a dream to be able to work with her, and to work with her in such an intimate way, to be able to build this range of t-shirts for her. They were gorgeous and sold really well, and it was a delight. But after and a part of that work, I went on to do a lot of work for Victoria, including rebranding the Positively brand, branding VSPDT, her dog trainer network, and her dog training academy, and then went on to become marketing faculty at her dog training academy, which I still am. And it's something I'm really passionate about and I love. So this gave me years and years of immersion into dog training the modern science-backed way, not the way I learned when I was a kid to spray water in my dog's face and smack them and jerk on the lead. This stuff is force and fear. This is discipline and punishment, right? And this is what a lot of us were taught when we were younger. It's what our parents were taught about how to control your dog. And what I learned through Victoria, through positive reinforcement training and understanding the science and the philosophy behind it, is that punishment doesn't work as well, and it doesn't work as long. So if you're going to use force and fear to change someone's behavior, in this particular situation, a dog, if we're going to use force and fear to change behavior, it might get quicker results, right? If you're going to smack a dog or force it to the ground, it's probably going to do what you want, and it's going to do it quickly because it gets the message. But it's now defining your relationship based on this force and this fear, not trust. And there's a really good chance that somewhere down the line, it's going to lead to some pretty negative consequences. You're going to get increasing behaviors that you don't like. You might get dog bites, all kinds of really negative stuff, because leading in corporate environments or your dog with fear is just not the vibe, right? It doesn't work as well. It might work quickly and for a short time, but it's not as good as long-term or as profoundly useful as using positive reinforcement, which is basically rewarding the behaviors you want to see more of. In dog training, you do that with a clicker and a treat, or a ball or something else a dog really wants. Give them access to it when they've done something that you like that you've marked with a click so they know what it is. It's click treat, right? To mark the behavior you want more of, and you simply ignore the behaviors you want to go away. And because those behaviors are not rewarded, they tend to drift away. Now, that's a massive oversimplification. Forgive me, dog trainers who are watching. I'm sure you will pick that apart, and please feel free. But that's the gist of it, right? When we want to see a behavior increase, we reward it. When we want to see a behavior go away, we don't punish it, we just ignore it. And I learned so much about running my own business and my own personal growth around feeling frozen or in procrastination because of fear, and using discipline, being harder on myself, working harder, doing more that felt like the hustle and grind, right? That felt really negative and felt really judgmental. That never really led to better outcomes for me. So I actually started like rewarding myself. And I did this in my groups and communities as well, setting a precedent basically for simply just adding rewards into the behaviors we wanted to see more of. And what do you know? Those behaviors become easier and more automatic until they become habits and things that you just don't have the same kind of resistance to as you did initially. And so all of this experience and thinking is really what led to my disdain for the word discipline, which in my mind is such a synonym for punishment. And I think so many of us treat it that way. It has to be hard to count. If it's not hard, I'm not doing it right. Now, the caveat to this is I'm not saying we never want to get uncomfortable. One of my favorite lessons from the research I've done for the Joy First book is that so much of our best joy comes on the other side of great challenge, great discomfort, a long wait, like discomfort, pain. These are really important parts of how we experience joy. And you don't have to look further than how dopamine works in our brain. If you've not read Dopamine Nation, go read it. It's so powerful. But it talks about this balance between the pain and pleasure in our brain. And when we're flooding our brains with dopamine from our phones in particular, or other substances or things that just give us all these happy drugs, our brain has to regulate and balance that. So it balances by basically increasing the pain of normal life so that you need more and more dopamine to just feel normal. And this is, again, a massive oversimplification of something complex that happens in the brain and body. But what can be really useful is to balance that out by increasing the pain, the discomfort that you feel on purpose. So trying to get more uncomfortable more often is what can allow that dopamine to actually affect you, right? Reset those dopamine receptors so that things, simple joys like the sunset or your kid laughing or the little stuff that isn't going to be chemically altered, like looking at the screen on your phone and using psychologically designed experiences to flood you with dopamine. If you can reset that and put yourself in positions where you're getting more uncomfortable more often, then you're increasing the pain side of that balance, and it creates more space. So again, I'm massively trying to summarize something complex. Go read Dopamine Nation for the full version. But one of the takeaways for me, based on what I've learned in my research about joy and how joy works in our body and in our mind, and the way some of these chemicals work in our brain, is that it is so important that we put ourselves in the way of more discomfort. One of the big differences between happiness and joy is that I think we really associate happiness with comfort. It is really hard for us to be in difficult circumstances and feel happy. It is really hard for us to be uncomfortable and feel happy. So we seek comfort in pursuit of happiness, and doing this can be the thing that makes joy impossible. And what I mean by that is often joy is harder to access, or it's a bit spontaneous or impulsive. It can be something that's harder to plan or doesn't feel as safe. And if we're keeping ourselves in these small little bubbles in order to stay comfortable, in order to be happy, we can eliminate our potential for joy entirely. I had a really great conversation with my friend Nell about this. We had a great live that we did together over on Substack. She calls herself the subtraction activist, and I love her approach to subtraction as an incredible strategy for leadership. And she wrote a Forbes article about this concept of comfort versus joy. I'll link that in the notes because it's so good. And I was delighted because it's my first feature in Forbes after 20 years of entrepreneurship, which felt really exciting. So that is such a wonderful gift that Nell has given me. And it was such a great conversation for us to have. But we deep dove into this happiness, comfort, joy thing. And I think it's a really profound part of the conversation that we're having today. I don't want you to misread what I'm saying about discipline and ease, and that I'm saying just get yourself as comfortable as possible and never step outside that. That is not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is don't punish yourself for the purpose of thinking that is how you earn your worthiness. Don't make it harder on yourself on purpose because you think that's how it has to be in order for you to find and experience success. Those are stories that you're telling yourself. It's not true. And I want to interrupt that, hopefully, with this episode today, while also putting that caveat that getting uncomfortable is good. It's important. It's an important part of joy. It's an important part of growth. And those things can coexist. This is why we look for nuance and we can hold that gray area that is not this black and white, always comfortable, always uncomfortable paradigm. Now, when it comes to actually putting this what would be easy into practical application, I love a good framework. You know that about me if you've taken my color quiz and found your personality type, and you know that you're a seaside, fireside, sunshine, or starshine. You know I love a framework. I also use archetypes in my branding. I love taking a personality quiz. I'm fascinated by Kolbe and Enneagram and MBTI and human design. And I find astrology fascinating. And it's not that I really treat any of them as complete gospel, but I think it's a fun exploration. I love to chase my curiosity. I love to explore these magical conversations and find the synchronicities and synergies there, and I enjoy it. I think it's fascinating. I am also someone who loves a bit of rigorous science. I continue to rigorously test everything that I put out there, everything I'm putting in the Joy First book, against existing scientific studies to say, this is what I've been saying, and this is what I believe based on the research that I read 10 years ago. Is this true? Has anything else been discovered that refutes what we thought was true when I started saying this? And I like facts and I like science, and I enjoy the process of that research and discovery. I feel like if you've done a master's degree and a dissertation, you have to, because I'll never forget sitting in my kitchen and the island just being covered in all these white papers. Oh my God, AI makes this so much easier now. Thank you so much. Speaking of ease and AI, we'll talk about that in a bit. Anyway, I think a framework that you align with, that you like, can be a really helpful way to do this. In my work, I use the applied color psychology frameworks, which are built on the work of Carl Jung, which is the same foundation of the stuff that MBTI, Myers-Briggs, is based on, and it's useful. And it doesn't mean you have to base your whole personality around it, or that other things aren't also true. I love Strengths Finder, and there's so much value in that. I think there's so many different ways where we can choose a way to see the world and give it meaning, and let that meaning help us take action, move forward, make decisions. Also, let ourselves off the hook, right? I know there's a huge conversation happening with women my age who are discovering and getting diagnosed as ADHD or autistic or both. And I know that's a controversial thing for a lot of people, because people are like, where have all these autistic people come from? And that is a conversation for a different day. We're not going to get into that today, but this is an experience I had where I kind of got a diagnosis I wasn't looking for as ADHD. And part of what came with that was I wasn't looking for a label, but oh my gosh, having language around some of the very specific parts of what make this a quote unquote diagnosis have been so useful to me. That there's words for something like rejection sensitive dysphoria, that there's words like hyper empathy, that there's words for things that I experience that have names that I can then go understand more about those things for myself, but also for the things I see in my kids, and being able to understand them and have strategies and tools to work around them in a way that is aligned for them, instead of just frustrating for me because I don't understand why they're not just doing what I ask right this second. So I think having a framework that feels true to you, that feels aligned for you, that you like. It can be any of them, it can be all of them, is a really great way to step into this ease. So later today, I'm going live with one of my friends, Jazz Jervis, who is an expert in business strategy and human design. And I love the business that she's built, where she has made these connections between how to do business and how to do that based on your human design. So in human design, just like any of these frameworks, there are types or categories, right? Generator, projector. There's ways that we make decisions based on a specific profile. And I knew nothing about human design before I met Jazz. I didn't really care about human design before I met Jazz, but the way that Jazz brought it home for me and the insights she gave me about myself, it's not like she told me something I didn't know. It's just like the ADHD thing. She gave me language for something I knew was a thing, which gave me permission to allow it to be a thing and find a workaround, find a tool, find a strategy. One of the big things I learned from my conversations with Jazz around human design is that I work better when I can respond to something. So it's harder for me when I have to start with a blank screen or a blank slate. I need something to respond to. And I did a quick video about this, which I'll link up in here, deeper diving into this. But that has been such a game changer for me, not because I didn't know it. I had a sense of this, I did know, but because I suddenly had permission to really action it, to really make it set in stone for how I work and how I start everything, how I do my calls in my groups, design time where people bring me Canva designs and I edit them, how I write my book. I sit down with AI to go through an outline to spark me into something instead of having to just sit down and write. And I think a lot of us probably work this way, where having something to respond to is so much easier than sitting down at that blank page. And having that permission, having that knowing has really helped me answer the what would be easy question ahead of having to ever even ask it in so many ways, because I now know this about myself, or I believe this about myself. I'm able to just implement it straight away, and it saves so much time and faff and freeze and procrastination and all sorts. So that kind of alignment has been huge for me. And if you're curious about human design, I would definitely check out the link I've put in the show notes here, because you're going to be able to grab the replay that I'm doing today with Jazz. If that's something you want to see, she has a free tool to go get your human design chart and an amazing free guide for how to do business as a generator, how to do business as a projector, with really in-depth ideas and advice about how to do marketing, how to do messaging, what business model. Brilliant. So good. Free. And you can grab that in the link that I pop in the show notes. So if that is a framework you're interested in, or if you're like me and you looked at it and you're like, this is way too complicated, I don't understand this, I don't like it, and then walked away from it, but you actually kind of do want to understand it, Jazz is your gal. She is amazing because she's business strategy and human design. I need that science and that magic when I'm working with someone, because I want to know that it's grounded in something that I would consider real, right? Not just astrology and the universe, but also really grounded stuff. So in addition to what I learned from my chats with Jazz about human design and not starting from a blank page, I wanted to share with you a few what would be easy decisions that I've made in my own life that have absolutely transformed little tiny things that maybe have led to bigger things, that can just give you an example of what I mean. So my favorite one, of course, is color. When I talk about living and working in a joy first way, that is around finding, choosing, and sharing joy each day. And I love color as a tool for that. And for me, it's because it's easy. I can plant it in my environment. I have to get dressed already anyway every day, so I can choose color at that point. I choose a mug that makes me feel how I want to feel. I make little color choices and I plant color choices around my house, and then I mix it up. But also, because I know about color, it means I acknowledge and notice it when I'm in nature, which gives me some of that awe and wonder, and loads of other points where it becomes a part of my creativity, my curiosity, my personal growth. It's amazing. So for me, what would be easy for personal growth? I love color as a tool, and color harmony in particular as a tool for just creating joyful spaces and outfits, and just about anything anywhere is a tool I love. And of course, if you like it too, you're in the right place, because that's what we talk about here. If this is something you want to dive deeper into for your life, definitely check out my Substack, because that's where I do the outfit of the day and managing, you're a seaside, but you like fireside colors. Those conversations are happening more over on Substack, and you can find me at Joy First World on Substack. Another what would be easy decision I made recently after years of sitting with it is I've started to plant seeds, which I've never done because I have nowhere to plant plants. I've always just had pots on the patio, but we have enough space. I could have a garden. I just don't have the tools or the skills to build one. And I didn't really want to allocate the budget to have really nice raised planters built. We're just not sure we're going to stay at this house very long. And I just didn't want to spend the money on it. And I've just been in this loop around, but I want flowers. I want a garden, but I don't want to spend money on it. And I don't have the skills or tools. And so finally, one day I asked myself, what would be easy? And I was like, easy would be something I could build, but without having to cut wood or do anything hard. And I found a kit online for 40 pounds that was just basically the pre-cut wood and the stakes for the ground and the screws to just make my own flower bed. So I ordered it, and that's what I did. I bought 2 of them. It was like 80 pounds plus delivery. And the next weekend I took a very short amount of time and built them. It wasn't hard. I definitely can screw a screw. Now, I do notice one of the corners is already coming undone, so it's not the perfect solution, but it was the easy one that now allows me to have a cut flower garden, which is amazing because you know what? The seeds were growing. They had to go somewhere and that decision is done. And I think that's a really good example. Another simple one I talk about all the time with my entrepreneur friends, because I think it is the number one way to get support in your life as an entrepreneur, especially if you work from home, is we have a cleaner. We call her our house manager because she also helps with laundry and other bits. Every once in a while, she'll do some cooking for us. She's amazing. She'll restock the trash bags and she's a dream. But we've had someone like this in our life since we had kids, because my husband and I both own businesses. We both work from home, and now we have 2 kids. And I did not want to be fighting about dishes. I did not want to be doing dishes instead of doing my work, and having someone who comes, she now comes twice a week. We've had someone as much as every day when we had the nanny. When we were living down south, it was cheaper to have a nanny than it was to have 2 kids in daycare. So we had a nanny and she would tidy and cook and shop, and it was amazing. And that is a hardcore what would be easy for me. When I've been on this fitness journey, this weight loss journey, I've had tons of questions where I've had to ask myself what would be easy in order to reach my protein goals, in order to make meals instead of order takeaways. And sometimes that has meant ordering from Simmer and getting pre-made meals. Sometimes it has meant getting the Charlie Bigham at the grocery store, which is something I just shove in the oven and it's done. It means buying the rice that's parboiled in the bag instead of cooking it from scratch. It means finding places where I can make these steps that make things easier, that make it possible for me to live in the way I want to live and achieve what I want to achieve without everything having to be the hardest, most difficult way. Now, one little caveat I want to put on some of this is a lot of us, if you're like me, again, here's the autism, here's the fireside, is I am extremely values driven. So I really struggle with a lot of things. Like I don't usually buy stuff from Amazon, which would be easy and convenient in most cases. That is a place where I'm willing to be less convenient because I don't want to support Amazon. And so I have to find alternatives because of my values. We boycott a lot of businesses because of this, which does make life harder. And that is a conscious choice I'm making because it feels aligned with my values. And that also feeds my joy, because living out of alignment with your values is a really painful thing to do. So again, I'm not just advocating that everything is the most convenient. It's being able to have the conversation with yourself around, I can allow myself this convenience. And that might mean I'm creating a little bit more package waste than I like, but I am taking my soft plastics to the soft plastics recycling. Finding the balance of not having to have everything be black and white all the time, being able to live within our values. AI makes things easier, and it's really fucking up the environment. So I have a belief that because capitalism really needs AI, they're going to sort that out. I do think that is going to be a solvable problem that the capitalists will solve because they need to solve it to keep building AI and transforming the world with it. And that is a benefit to them. And so they will do it. Whereas other things that are not a benefit to anyone keep getting worse. So trying to find the ways that you pick and choose your battlegrounds in terms of the places where you go all values and ethics and inconvenience and hard versus allowing yourself some middle ground where you find the balance for yourself. So for me, one of the things I've struggled with is I don't really like supporting OpenAI and ChatGPT, but I've built Citrus with it and I have clients using it. And I want to be someone who is helping other people come along and learn AI. I want to help people with AI. And I feel like it's important that I stay up to date with it in order to do that. So it's not like a means justify the end situation as much as I'm choosing to operate in a way that is outside my values, even though I love Claude. And I primarily use Claude, I do still have a subscription to OpenAI. And I don't love that, but I keep revisiting that decision and deciding that for me, ethically, morally, it falls on the side of acceptable or something that I'm going to continue to do for now because of these other reasons. So I'm trying to be a little bit less impulsive and rash with my massive immediate boycotts of things in that emotional decision making. I think much of that is very important, and I am very pro using our money to support small business and to use it as our vote, basically, for what we want to see more of, which is why I'm so glad to see 2 million people just left OpenAI straight away when there was this controversy with the US government. And now there's conversations where the US government's going to be a stockholder in OpenAI, which I think is so dangerous. It just keeps getting better, right? So my point is find a balance, right? And the whole point, the whole energy of what would be easy is allowing it to be easy and not getting yourself tied up in loops. And for me to do that, because I do get in those loops, I often hire people to help me get out of them. So for example, I have a personal trainer for 3 years while I was really getting through the meat of this weight loss journey. And she was the one who would talk me off the ledge. And she'd be like, Nick, just order the meals. Especially she would ask me, how's this week going to be? What do you have on this week? And I'm like, I've got call after webinar, after this. She was like, why don't you got some ready-made meals this week? Why don't you make it easier on yourself? When are you going to the grocery store? Having people in our life that can be that mirror, that sounding board for what would be easy and encouraging us to take that step can be so helpful and important. So if you want to step into this joy experiment and try it out for yourself, the activity is just to ask yourself what would be easy, especially if you're struggling with a particular decision or wanting to move into more joy first living and working, but not knowing how. This is a really good starting point. And part of that is going to be having this conversation with yourself, the judgy clipboard holding lady in your brain around ease, not necessarily being laziness or irresponsibility, that you are allowed ease, you deserve ease. And by the way, ease can be very strategic, right? You're conserving priceless time, energy, life force. A great example is the Steve Jobs of the world, or example of someone I've met in real life, Richard Branson, who wear the same uniform all the time so they don't have to think about what clothes they're wearing. I've had the privilege twice to visit Necker Island and hang out with Richard Branson for a week at a time. And he always wears the same thing every day. He wears the same swim shorts and trainers and t-shirt every day. You see him every day. It's the same thing. So he must have 10 sets of this stuff and he just rotates through it. He's usually wearing a t-shirt with his son's music logo on it and swim shorts. I'm guessing because he's got the ethos that most of us had when we were there, which is you always want to be able to jump in the sea, which when you live on an island and you're surrounded by it is a great joy first life choice. I love it. And so I think it's important to acknowledge that whoever the people are that you might look up to or want to emulate some of their behaviors because you want to get the results that they've gotten, it's important to acknowledge that they're making a lot of these what would be easy choices in their life from a place of strategy, not from a place of laziness or irresponsibility. So if you're going to try out this what would be easy question, really Notice any of the resistance that comes up, any of the voices that come up, and what they say to you about it. And then find and choose your easy choice. If you need someone to soundboard it, definitely do that. Obviously, AI can sometimes be that person for you. Being in a peer group, we talk about in my membership, we talk about having above, around, and below support. So this is a place where I think it's really helpful to have the above support, a coach, a mentor, a personal trainer, someone in your life who can take a step back and see what you're not seeing and be that soundboard. You can certainly come join us. We have a community called the Joy First Founders Circle where I can be that soundboard for you. And our coach, Heather, who's an amazing, amazing human being and coach, can also be that sounding board. So you can come check that out. That can be a really helpful way to action this particular joy experiment. What would be easy? And as I mentioned, this summer, I'm running these free workshops. We're doing 4 sessions this summer, 2 in June and 2 in July, around alignment. And the one that we're doing today is with my friend Jazz. She's an expert in human design and business strategy, and she is going to be talking about decision making from this place of ease, but ease in alignment with your energy, your design. And it's such a juicy place to begin. If you are listening to this later and you miss the workshop that we're having today, there are 3 more, and you can actually buy the replays from all of them with all of the resources like that free guide I mentioned earlier and the slides and all that kind of stuff for $29. So you can always catch this even if you're not listening live, you're not listening the day this comes out. There's lots of opportunities to jump into that if you want to. The link will be in the show notes. You can go check that out. As always, I hope this episode has been helpful and that it helps inspire and motivate you to find, choose, and share joy this week. This season of the Joy First podcast, we are breaking down these joy experiments. If you missed it, the first part of this season was around the joy audit, where you can understand your baseline of where you're at now with joy. And we're looking at how to run some joy experiments in your life to be able to joy stack, add more joy a little bit at a time through really simple things that don't add to your to-do list. And so I'm going one by one through these joy experiments and sharing with you my lived experience of trying things out, seeing what works for me, seeing what doesn't, and handing them over. So hopefully they can bring you some value and some more joy, and you can find your own blend, your own unique potpourri of joy stacking that is going to build you that joy first life. And it's so contagious. It rubs off on everyone around you. So it might feel a little bit selfish to focus on your own joy, but it isn't. It is one of the best things you can do right now for our collective joy to help us build that joy first world. So I hope I can get you in on the joy first revolution and that I've radicalized you, and together we can help create this world by starting with something as simple as asking, what would be easy? I'll see you next time.